Sox on 35th is next. Doors open on the left.
How's it going, everybody? This is your host, Coughlin, and welcome to the Sox on 35th podcast. We are back with another exciting episode covering your division-leading Chicago White Sox. As always, well, not as always, because Jordan Lazowski is obviously not here because he had better things to do at a time that we swept Detroit over the weekend. But I am joined by Nik Gaur and Brett Haffner. Gentlemen, 5.5 games up. How are we feeling?
Yeah, it feels great. To be honest, it kind of reminds me in a good way. There was like the end of the 2022 season, which of course that was the season where the White Sox were never more or less than 5 games above or below 500, I want to say. We were like 4 games back of Cleveland toward the end of the year, heading into a 3-game series at home. And everyone's going to get all hyped up. Like, let's sweep Cleveland. We'll be 1 game back. And then we'll have like 10 games after that to catch them. And everyone was all, excited about it. And then they swept us at home. And this kind of feels like the opposite of that. Like, Detroit fans are saying the same thing. We could be in first place by the end of the weekend, and it's going to be so great. We're going to reclaim, the AL Central, and then we sweep them in their house. So it feels really good to be on this side of it.
And I'll actually tell you, now that you mentioned 2022, it just occurred to me that today is actually the 4-year anniversary of one of my favorite baseball games I've ever attended. Is when Justin Verlander and Dylan Cease on a random Tuesday night in 2022 were both the favorites for Cy Young, and they both shoved against one another at rate, and we ended up winning. That was 4 years ago, and obviously, as Nick said, we are in a position where it feels a little bit better, I think, than we certainly did back then. So I'm happy that, we had a great weekend of baseball that just happened, I love that we're in the position that we are, and I think people should remember that we are very grateful to be in this position, even more so after a good old sweep.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like a sweep bringing out the brooms always makes everybody feel a little bit better. So it feels like it's been a little bit too long since we've swept someone that had some real oomph to it, and being able to go to Detroit and take their lunch money. I mean, I think that's what the doctor kind of ordered, because that was the team that we were getting a little bit worried about last week. A team that I've constantly put down as like, I'm not freaking scared of Detroit. They just traded Scooble away. Like, there's no shot they'll be relevant. And then they found a little bit of relevance there. And then we once again reminded them who the big brother is. So it's always nice to do that. It's always nice to remind yourself how much Detroit sucks. And it was a very good showing of that. So I feel very good. As you said, Brett, we should all be very grateful for the position we're in, and I, for one, am, because anytime in any sport when Chicago can beat Detroit, yeah, it feels pretty good. Feels pretty good. But obviously, we've got quite a bit of that to cover in this episode, so if you're a Detroit fan, please don't run. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Also, be sure to check out the website, soxon35th.com, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at soxon35th. And dude, this is the first time we've done it. We try not to beg over here at Sox on 35th. But if you are subbed to us on YouTube and you really do like these YouTube live streams that we do, make sure to go over to that notification bell and hit that so you're notified every time we go live, because that does, not only does it help us, but it helps you guys be able to chime in and tell us how stupid we are in the comments. So we greatly appreciate it. So, as we kind of let off the show with, the White Sox swept the Tigers in Detroit. Gosh, that feels good to say again. And now lead the AL Central by season high 5.5 games, if that is to be correct on the podcast rundown. I know
it is,
but I feel pretty good. I feel pretty good about that. But Nick, why don't you kick us off, buddy? What are your overall takeaways from the last week of games so far for the White Sox?
Yeah, it was an up and down week, but obviously I'd much rather they end it the way they did than, sweep the Reds and win one in Detroit. So overall, very good series. There are a few things that I think we can talk about, we will talk about. So I'm not going to say all of them. I'll wait till you guys are done too. But the two I want to start with, one is that I think we almost aren't giving enough appreciation to Will Venables sometimes, just in the sense that every single time this team looks like, oh, maybe, the cracks are starting to show. Maybe they're not going to, win the division after all. Whenever I've thought that this season, they immediately sweep somebody, win 2 out of 3. They just bounce back so well. And I know a lot of that is on the players and their mentality. I'm not trying to take away credit from them, but I think Venable also deserves a lot of credit just for the way that they're always bouncing back. That's something that I think a manager definitely contributes to, sort of keeping them focused to play and all that kind of stuff. And then the other shout out I want to give quickly here is to the bullpen, just because they had to cover so many innings in this Detroit series, especially that first game with, the Newcomb opener game. They only got, I think, 3 1/3 out of Urquidy, which wasn't terrible, but still, they had to cover a lot of innings. Taylor pitched back-to-back games and multiple innings in the first one, which I don't think he's really done this year. Brian Hudson was really good. Obviously, Newcomb already said. Just a huge team effort. And the bullpen is the kind of thing where you only really hear about it when they're giving in runs and everyone's saying they're bad. So because they were so good this series, and they kind of deserve the shout out for really helping us get the sweep.
Yeah, I'd really say that I think with the pressure really starting to get on, and I know that a lot of the players, even in post-game interviews, were talking about how kind of important this series was. I think what I walk away from this series most impressed about is that they continued to have the same resilience they have all year when the lights were on them. Because obviously there was a lot of added importance to this series. And I think that, you even look at today's game, we're here on Sunday when the Sox were down early because Burke did not look great. I thought it was awesome just to see the battle back in those middle to late innings. And I think that, like Nick said, today was another day where we had to cover some innings because we didn't get the length out of Burke that we had been used to and expected to. Ultimately, that resilience and that kind of fight, that's why this team is showing that they can be good. I mean, they even showed it in the Red Series. Obviously, the outcome of the series wasn't what we hoped for. But I think of that 9-8 game, of that so many things went wrong. An unbelievable amount of things went wrong. They almost came back to tie it. And this is something that I think is a trademark of this team, is never say die. I feel like they never just roll over and die and, okay, the game's over. We're used to thinking that as Sox fans, but in 2026, that is not the case.
Yeah, and I think the offense really in Detroit, it speaks volumes to what this team can be, because you really have to look at the fact that we really were not going to let Detroit be into the series. It felt like every time they would get their bats going, we would just once again, gain a 2-3 run lead and be like, oh no. We're not even going to let this one be close. And they're basically, to summarize both of what you guys said, it's grit. There's so much grit with this baseball team of just, we're going to battle every single inning. We're going to battle every single game. And some of them are going to turn out in our favor, like most of them have, and some aren't. The Cincinnati series was frustrating because it kind of felt like a little bit of a trap. I wish we would have highlighted it a little bit on the episode last week about the potential of Cincinnati series being a trap, because it was expected by everyone in the baseball world that the White Sox are going to win that series against Cincinnati. Maybe they drop one, but for the most part, going into this 16-game stretch, they're gonna take care of business in Cincinnati, and then they have a huge series going against Detroit. Obviously, it didn't work that way for us. It feels like everything that could go wrong against us did go wrong in that Cincinnati series, but we showed that we were not going to let that carry over into Detroit, because we knew, regardless of what happened in that Cincinnati series, we needed to handle business on the road in Detroit, and we did every last bit of that and more. I want to hear more about what happened with Sean Burke, because it sounds like it was such an anomaly of a game, and it looked like such an anomaly of a game. I almost wonder if maybe he was a little bit under the weather or something was going on, because it seemed like his fastball was down a little bit compared to what it usually is as well. But good on the offense to be able to just bring the bats, pick him up, and have us continue to move forward, man. Anytime you can pull out the brooms, especially against a team like Detroit, dude, it's reason for celebration. And hopefully this is all the momentum we need going into the rest of this long trip that we've got coming up here. And honestly, I think a guy that deserves a lot of credit when it comes to the bats is a guy like Chase Mydroth. Brett, I love that you're on this episode, because I remember specifically a game last year that me and you we sat first row down third baseline, and I think a good 20-minute conversation was had about just how Chase Mydroth is going to end up being a star, and people are underselling it. And how do you feel about Chase Mydroth right now?
I mean, we may have been calling it a long time ago at this point, but I think just the insane heater that he's been on is awesome. And I think that the type of ball he's playing right now kind of summarizes a little bit of the narrative of this year a little bit, where we thought that we were seeing maybe him sell out for power a little bit too heavy. And maybe we were seeing a lot of those harder swings that we weren't used to seeing him do, maybe a little bit more strikeout heavy, which sure, he's striking out a little bit more this year. But since the All-Star break, and maybe even to extrapolate a little bit of a farther sample, maybe over the last month, like even a little bit longer than the All-Star break, I think that he has really found this great middle ground of being the single slap hitter that we know he can be with some additional power to it. And I think that one thing that I actually had pointed out on Twitter early in the year, he was doing a lot of tinkering with his batting stance. I think he's finally found one where he sits the bat on his shoulder now and lets it sit there. You know, he's not really doing the bat-to-bat tinkering that we did before. It's good that we've seen him find something cool. And hey, he's been hitting some homers recently and just kind of spraying balls everywhere. It's been a lot of fun to watch. And also, just as a side note, you know, the defense floor, exactly what we expect of him. That really hasn't been, you know, any sort of different, really. I've always liked his play at second base, and I think that he's continued well at that. And he even had a nice game at short when he had to fill in that one day.
Yeah, I like that you brought that up at the end there, Brett, because even last year, I want to say it was before Coulson Montgomery got promoted, Mydroth was playing a decent amount of shortstop. And I was very, very impressed by how smooth he was at short. And I think the only real knock you could have on him at short is his arm strength, but it was not terrible either. Like, it was good enough to make the plays that a shortstop would need to make. Like, he's a plus defender at short, just hasn't really needed to play there very frequently, which is totally fine. It's good to have people like that from a versatility point of view. But yeah, Mydroth has been so impressive lately, and the defense too. I mean, that's another thing I want to bring up about the other thing I should say I wanted to bring up about this series is I felt that the White Sox defense in the Detroit series, especially the infield defense, was very sharp because Detroit was hitting a lot of 100+ mile-an-hour ground balls at the infield, and there were some picks that Vargas had today on Sunday's game that I thought were fantastic. There was the one obviously that Murakami had in the 7th or 8th inning that may or may not have saved the game because it would have been an RBI single if it got past him. Like, the whole defense was just completely on point this weekend. And Mydroth, of course, is usually a big part of that as well. But really everybody, I can't think of any moments where I was disappointed in the defense. And then you had some of the more fluke plays like the Hagen Smith 107-mile-an-hour self-defense catch, which, we'll take it. So, yeah, I'm really impressed by Mydroth. Obviously, it's good to have a podcast of 3 big Mydroth fans on here, but also just the defense in general has been so sharp.
Yeah, no, the defense was something that I was never totally worried about, but kind of really just a guy that looks comfortable out there. And anytime you get a mic'd up of him out there too, or like see a clip of how jacked up he gets towards the end of a game once they win it, whether it's just on the final ground ball or anything, it's like this guy he's got the juice. He just keeps everybody going out there. He keeps everybody fresh. And somebody said this to me on Twitter early in the year, and I'm like, man, that is quite the take to have. But there was already some comparisons to a guy like Dustin Pedroia for what a Chase Mydroth does for us. And while I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to have a Dustin Pedroia-esque career, it really does feel like that's the type of impact he's having in our lineup right now is what a Dustin Pedroia would have had for those, mid to late 2010s White Sox teams. And he's a guy that just brings it every single day. And he's a guy that has really sneaky power, kind of like you alluded to, Brett. He can definitely hit. He can hit a little bit everywhere in the outfield. He can hit gaps. But as we saw in the Boston series, and it probably had a little bit of an FU attached to those home runs a little bit more, but it shows he can hit with power too. So I just love the progression of him, and then you look at guys like Miguel Vargas, who was already brought up, and even Tristan Peters, who is starting to bounce back as well. Really feels like this offense is all moving in the right direction. It feels like all guys are kind of on the right run of where this team needs to be, because as we've seen in the last week, we're going to need our offense to be able to pick us up. And, it's just being realistic about where our pitching rotation is. Well, man, we're going to have those days where the offense is going to need to carry the load. And it seems like everybody's starting to get hot at the right time.
Yeah, I agree. And with Vargas in particular, I was a little surprised, to be honest, by the amount of people who were starting to maybe have some doubts a little bit, given how he was a bit colder out of the All-Star break. But the thing about Vargas is whether he's hot or cold to the plate, the one consistent thing about him this year is that he's been unlucky a lot. Like he has a lot of line drives right at the shortstop's mid, right at the center field, or whatever it may be. And that you can see that in the numbers too. Like he has statistically been a little bit unlucky. But this sort of this week he had, because he had a homer against Cincinnati too, I believe, was really needed for him just to start seeing some of those balls, go over the fence, or in many cases, I think he had several doubles as well. And like you said, Duke Peters has been turning it around, which has been great to see because his July was not one to write home about after that cycle game. So
it was a miserable run after the All-Star break.
Yeah, and it's like the truth was always somewhere in the middle with Peters. Like I don't think he was the perennial 300 hitter he was looking like, but he also wasn't like the terrible version of him that couldn't even get on first base to save his life. So I think we're starting to see that balance out. And the only other guy I want to bring up here, because we haven't yet, is Murakami, because not only did he hit all those home runs against Detroit, but I feel like one undervalued thing about him is his consistency. I was actually really surprised. I looked at his OPS by month this year, and it's like 939, 937, 929, and then the current month. Like he's always just solid, whether it's more from home runs or from walks. He's always giving you that production. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if by the end of August, his OPS is like in the 920, 940 range once again. That's just kind of the hitter that he's turning into. So very much, the team very much needed those home runs this weekend, especially the one today. But having him back in the lineup and healthy has been such a blessing for everyone else too, because you see, people like Vargas benefiting from it.
I want to highlight. I'll highlight Peters here for a second, as obviously a big supporter of Mr. Banana Bonds. But I also it kind of felt like in this Detroit series, he kind of found his approach again, and obviously he could have caught some lightning a bottle this weekend. But, one of the things is that, one of his best skills is being a gap to gap, line to line type of hitter. And I think we saw today's ground rule double that went down the left field line. Perfect example of that. Kind of smashing a homer down the right field line. Perfect. Working some walks in there too. Like I feel like he had been so susceptible just to a lot of swing and miss on anything breaking ball. And it felt really nice to see just his approach get so much better within this series. And sure, I think that with Brenton Doyle on this team, he's going to have a lot more limited run than probably what he has been. And I actually read a really good article that apparently Brenton Doyle has actually gotten pretty close with Tristan since coming to the team. And I think that them being able to recognize, hey, we're splitting a little bit of workload here, but I think that they both gave each other such big props on, hey, we have two Gold Glove caliber defenders in the outfield together. If they do the construction of Doyle in center and Peters in left, which I actually really love when they do that, because that is some lockdown defense there. But I just was really happy to see Peters kind of come around a little bit. And sure, I think that we're still going to be kind of finding a middle ground of, from when he hit the cycle to the awful July. But if that kind of hitter is going to be your catching is reserved for the 9 hole, but anywhere in that 8 hole, like if we have a Tristan Peters or a Brenton Doyle down in that lineup at that spot, I like where our lineup is at, because those are both, hitters who are going to give you a good at bat and give you a chance to get on base in a good way. So just wanted to highlight Peters there.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great combo to have in center field. I remember when the Brenton Doyle trade originally, came live to press, and I was a little like, who did we just get? Like, what are we doing here? Like, this kind of seems a little bit different than what we were planning on doing at the deadline. But, how can you not love what he's already brought to the team? And, maybe that's kind of what Tristan needed as well. Like with how much he was struggling, he kind of need that guy to kind of come in and be like, oh, I have to really work for my opportunities now, and I have to make the most of them, because I'm not going to be able to get by struggling like this very long, because I don't necessarily have the resume in Major League Baseball quite yet. So I think it's a good combo to have. I think you get a lot of similar things and you get a lot of different things out of each one of them. And being able to have either one of those guys in center field on any given day is a very, very good problem to have. So I think them getting along goes a long way as well, kind of like you alluded to, Brett. And I think hopefully this is kind of stuck a little bit of a fire into Tristan to continue to have this moving forward, because any help we can get off the bench is going to be a benefit once we get to October games, as long as we stay on this wavelength that we're going to. So yeah, I've been very happy with that. And even to the Miguel Vargas point, Nick, even with how unlucky he is, it's crazy that he's still as good as he is on the stat sheet. Like the fact that he's still hitting for power and, you know, hitting for extra base hits as often as he is, even with the, you know, bad strings of luck he does have at time with just hitting the ball at the, you know, wrong spot or anything like that. He's absolutely just pissing on everything he's touching. And that is just great news, because it means that it will translate. So continuing to move forward, man, I'm really happy with both those guys. And honestly, I think Munetaka Murakami, he really gets lost in the shuffle, because he was so good to start the year and just was doing just such astronomical things from the start, that him just like contributing on a consistent basis without being too loud about it, it does get lost in kind of you know, people's minds about like how good this guy actually is. But yeah, I mean, Munetaka is the talk of the town when he's hitting home runs, but he really does not get enough credit for how consistent he is on a day-to-day basis. So I'm really glad you highlighted that as well. Moving along here, and this is a discussion I really didn't want to have, because it involves basically Drew Romo and his doppelganger that just happens to have a cooler mustache than Drew Romo. The White Sox claimed Jake Rogers and sent Edgar Carroll back down to AAA. I'm going to wait until the end. I'm going to let you guys have your thoughts. Nick, why don't you kick us off about how you feel about this?
I mean, the timing is a little annoying, just because Carroll had started to really hit well over the last, you know, week or so. And I know, you know, if Jordan were here, he would be saying that Carroll just isn't good enough on defense, doesn't call a good game, and I get it.
So glad he's not here to have this discussion.
Yeah. I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, for the most part, I do think that Romo isn't maybe that good at it either, but maybe just a little bit better is one way to put it. But when it comes to Jake Rogers, I mean, I don't really understand too much what he's bringing to the table, other than just like leadership, experience, etc. Like from a pure on the field standpoint, his defense, at least by the numbers, has fallen off a bit this year, and he was never, you know, the greatest hitter anyway. So I'm hoping it's just a kind of a Band-Aid move, and the hope is to have Kyle Teal back in like, you know, 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it ends up being. That's, you know, I feel like I've been saying that at different points this season, but that's how I feel about it. And the only impression I had of Rogers in this first game with the White Sox, other than, you know, the bunts double play, is in the 9th inning with 2 challenges remaining. There was a pitch from Hudson that was a strike that Rogers did not challenge. And I was just like, why are you, like, it's the opposite problem of Carroll and Romo. Like, you have both challenges remaining and it's the bottom of the 9th. Like, just do it. It would have been a strike. And he didn't even consider it, it didn't look like. So I'm not going to judge him too harshly for one missed challenge, but it's weird having that be my complaint about a White Sox catcher, because so often this year it's been the opposite.
You know, I think to kind of put my Jordan Lazowski hat on here, I need my 4th of July White Sox hat here to really, you know, get, and where's my short sleeve hoodie too? Look at the Jordan. I'm going to put the Jordan.
You're just going right at him. Okay.
I got to put the Jordan fit on here. There's, you know, and from things that John alluded to in the broadcast when talking about the decision to bring on Jake Rogers, it's clear that there are some objectives that the White Sox have for Edgar Carroll that he is still not meeting quite yet, because they have brought this up numerous times in discussions about that he still has some things to work on. And at the end of the day, I mean, hey, Drew Romo actually kind of had a nice little series there in Detroit. Obviously, he's the smallest of small samples, but ultimately it's something at the end of the day. You know, these are all just stopgap measures at the end of the day. Like Nick said, you know, the Teal rehab process seems to be going pretty well. We're getting some positive updates, and hopefully we get him back, you know, at some point to help play some meaningful baseball in September into October. But I really think that, you know, the argument that it feels kind of just like an old argument to say at this point, but clearly there's something about Drew Romo's game calling and his presence behind the plate that is keeping him up on the roster. But really, I don't got much more than that, just because it feels like we're really just doing any sort of stopgap measure to get to Kyle Teal. But it is nice to see Carroll hit. He did also go 3 for 5, I believe, in Charlotte tonight. So he's been, it's good to see him hit the ball again. But it's just, I don't know. It's a tough scenario because spots 1 through 8 in the lineup usually are great now. We're not having to really concern ourselves with those. We are now concerning ourselves with spot 9 in the order. And really kind of just that.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, as much as I'm trying to sell it up that this would have been some insane argument between me and Laz, I honestly, I get it. I don't love the idea of having Drew Romo and Jake Rogers be our only options at catcher, because if there's ever a situation where we do need any more offense from the position, we're just not going to find it. Because, I mean, dude, Jake Rogers he's never been a good hitter. I mean, time is told there. I mean, it's all defense for him, and obviously, like I can't argue it, because again, Drew Romo continues to be on this major league roster, and everyone raves about what he does behind the plate. So I really can't argue that too much. It has gotten more frustrating now than it was the last time Carroll got sent down, because Edgar's really starting to see the ball well, and this is what all the Edgar Carroll guys were trying to see at the beginning of the season. Him kind of to try to take an opportunity here and show that he has a long-term spot as a catcher for the Chicago White Sox. And his bat just did not help him in any sort of way for a good majority of the season. So now that he's actually getting hot and he's looks like a guy that, we could have an entire offensive lineup with, it really does suck to see him get sent down in favor of Jake freaking Rogers. You know what I mean? It is what it is. And obviously, like you guys said, we're trying to stopgap until we can get Kyle Teal back. But it really does suck to not get any sort of offensive output from the catcher position. Although I will tip my hat that Drew Romo did have a good series. I am not betting any futures on Drew Romo here moving forward, and I don't think anyone else should either. But it is what it is.
I've got one Jake Rogers comment. They claimed him at a very innocuous time. Perhaps as a stopgap measure, they said, hey, we have 2 series left against probably the team that we probably are most concerned about in the AL Central. Why not get some intel on our biggest challenge likely in the division? I mean, his intel perhaps paid off some dividends this series in ways that we may not have seen. But,
it did feel pretty convenient.
The timing helped a lot. That's all I'm going to say. Maybe a conspiracy, but I think that, I think a lot of Tigers fans were like, oh, Rogers is giving them all the info.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there were some comments made by the Tigers broadcasting teams at various points this weekend about how it's almost like the White Sox know what pitch is coming. I don't think they were accusing of cheating or anything like that, but and that's something that your advanced scouting might be able to come across as well. But it very well could be that Rogers just knows a lot about the pitcher's tendencies and gave some intel. So yeah, it's not a bad idea, Brett. And in a perfect world, Jake Rogers catches 5 more games for the White Sox, and Romo catches the other 10 or whatever in the meantime, and then Teal is back. So we're really it's not worth a 15-minute segment here or anything, but it's interesting. The timing is interesting, like you said.
Yeah, no, I mean, timing is everything, and it does feel like it kind of just happened to work in our favor that Jake Rogers had gotten moved from his 3rd team in 2-3 weeks. So I mean, it kind of worked out pretty well for us. But he has a cool mustache, and some people think he might be good in the locker room. I don't know. I think we're good enough in the locker room. I don't think we need to try to aim for any more vet presence. But I guess Jake Rogers, you're one of us for right now, and you probably deserve some credit for what we were doing in this series. So I know you. I'd ask you to hit the ball, but I know you can't. So speaking of other points in the lineup, so we've talked about really a lot of the stars in the lineup, and we've talked about obviously the free 3 outs or 3 to 4 outs we're giving up every game as well. This is a very dicey conversation that everybody has on White Sox Twitter. It goes a lot of different ways. Coulson Montgomery's slumping. There's no other if ands way about it. I'm a huge Coulson Montgomery guy. I can acknowledge it. I can see that obviously something's really not working for him. I think I kind of have an idea of what it is, but I'd love to hear what you guys kind of think. Where are you at with where Coulson Montgomery is right now? Still, as far as power hitting goes, one of the better power hitting shortstops in baseball. Obviously, that's slowing down a lot since probably the first half, and it's really come to strength in the second half. But how do you guys feel about where Coulson's at right now at this point in the season?
You know, it really sucks to see. I'm just gonna outright say it. You know, it really absolutely sucks. Two things that I think I can kind of highlight here a little bit. One, it feels like teams are exploiting his weaknesses to the maximum. And some of the at bats, you know, I've been watching with my family a little bit recently this weekend, and my dad and I oh, here comes another down and in breaking ball. Here comes another down and in breaking ball. Ooh, what are they going to do to close him out? An up and away fastball. Ooh, it's starting to get real predictable on attacking the weaknesses. And, you know, the teams, that's what they need to do because they know that swing and miss is very likely. And then there were a couple at-bats this weekend that kind of, I think, show that the approach, I really think that a lot of this is, you know, a little mental up in the head with approach because there were two strikeouts looking this weekend that were very cookie fastballs right down the middle that Coulson just watched it go by, completely let that go by. And I feel like those are pitches that he and a lot of the White Sox lineup know how to do damage on. Like, I want to come from this as a perspective of we have seen Coulson do a lot of damage on mistakes. And I feel like that is something that he did really well last year. And even when he was at the beginning of this year too, he really can do damage on the mistakes, but it feels like he's not doing damage on the mistakes, which honestly, it's why you see that some of his hits this past series kind of came on some little bloop singles or a broken bat single. Like, we know that he struggled to square up the ball. That's kind of been in the underlying data forever. But, you know, I think that the approach, he's really going through it right now. And some of the at-bats, you know, people are really like, oh, he looks a lot better this weekend. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. You know, I think that it was a good call to move him down in the lineup to the 6th, though, just because Benintendi, who we haven't mentioned once, is amazing with runners in scoring position. But that's another topic for another time. Benny and the Jets. But really, like, Coulson, he's going through it. At-bats are predictable. Results are starting to become a little predictable too. I'm curious to Nick, Duke, just kind of where you guys are at with Coulson right now.
Yeah, I think you put it well. I am grateful for the fact that he did have those 2 clutch hits this weekend that I probably wouldn't have won those games without them, at least the one on Saturday. But to your point, yeah, it's still tough at bats. I was one of those people who thought on Friday that he looked a lot better with the plate. Like, other than that last at bat where he struck out in the middle fastball looking, he was having deep flyouts. He was working counts. Okay, maybe he's onto something. But then the rest of the weekend, I did not feel that way anymore. So honestly, I'm joking when I say this, but my beef about this is with the White Sox fan base itself, because it reminds me a lot of during the last rebuild, everyone understandably didn't like that Moncada was always wincing and seemed like he was in pain and stuff. And it annoyed me that when people said that, because I was like, look at his games played by year. Like, he's this, other than Abreu, he's the most durable player on the team. He only misses 15 games a year. And then in 2022 or 3, that stopped, and he started missing half the season here and there. And with Montgomery, it was kind of similar. I remember Duke and Jordan and I having a conversation on an episode in May about is Coulson Montgomery a problem? Was the premise. And I was like, at the time he had an 825 OPS, a 120 WRC plus. He was having a great year defensively. And I was like, why is this guy a problem? People just don't want that he strikes out. And now that was spoken into existence just with the Moncada injury. And now he actually is kind of a problem. So I agree, Brett, that it is probably more of a mental thing. I don't think he suddenly lost his ability, especially because from a sample size standpoint, he's been bad for 35, 40 games. And he was good for the first 130, 140 of his career. So I'm hoping that he figures it out, and who knows how much, if at all, the back injury plays into it. But yeah, Duke, I'm curious to hear what you think maybe the fix is that you alluded to, because I don't really have any ideas around that.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it so much as a fix as much as what I'm seeing, what I see from his at bats, and it's a lot of lot of him taking the first pitch often, like very often. It's not him kind of like really going into an at bat, like swinging aggressive right from the jump. It seems like he'll take the first pitch, uh, usually a very hittable pitch, usually something that obviously is starting to get into a scouting report is that he's taking pretty early, which is funny to say considering how much he strikes out, but we'll get there. And he'll take a first pitch that looks very hittable for Coulson. And you kind of see it written on his face when he does take it, a good pitch. You see the immediate frustration come out of him, and that's where Brett, I think you are onto something where it's something mental with him, where it's kind of really starting to be something where he's thinking too much at the plate at this point. And it really just turns into the second he gets down in an at bat, he's swinging at anything to try to get back into it. Not enough that he's not looking at things on a pitch to pitch basis. It almost feels like he's like coaching himself at the plate of, I need to take the first pitch, try to get ahead, and then once I'm ahead, I can find the pitch that I want to hit. Well, when you go down one pitch immediately and the best pitch you were going to be able to hit was the first pitch, that's always unfortunate, but a guy like the t-shirt that I'm wearing, he used to thrive on hitting the first pitch because it was the best pitch he was going to get. So then you're in a situation where you're down 0-1 and you're constantly trying to get yourself back. You're trying to make up lost time in a sense, make up lost pitches. And it constantly turns into strikeouts, and it constantly turns into him swinging at pitches that have no business being swung at. So it seems like he has a lot of frustration at the plate right now. And it's a shame because even that scenario that I described, even if he does go up like 2-0, which I've seen happen, he'll take one pitch that'll end up being a strike, and it's immediately the same thing. It's like, man, I really should have swung at that. Hopefully he gives me another one on this next pitch. And then kind of similar to what you're talking about, Brett, it's breaking ball down away that he's swinging at, and it's a fastball inside that he's going to swing at. And even if he's going to get contact on those, they're not going to go much of anywhere. So he's having a mental battle with himself at the plate. And I don't know if that's from a coaching point that he was given of that, maybe at the beginning of the slump where it was like, hey, you got to start trying to take some of these bad pitches early in an at bat, try to work a full at bat. And that's just continuing not to work. Or it's turning into a scenario where he kind of needs a mental reset at the plate, which is not outside the realm of possibility when it comes to what Coulson's been throughout his entire hitting progression. I mean, you got to remember, we sent this guy to Arizona. We always talk about the Arizona trip, about how he went and learned how to hit down in Arizona. So not that I want to say that that's how, I'm not saying we got to send him back down to Arizona or anything like that. But what I'm saying is he has to find a reprisal to like approach to his what he's doing at the plate. Like he have to have like some sort of reset, maybe take a day or two off, really work with hitting coaches to kind of be like, all right, what is my approach at the plate? Because we need to start from scratch.
Yeah, I guess on the topic of kind of Coulson's prolonged struggles, I just kind of wanted to point out a couple of the splits that are with this because it does get kind of ugly. April hit an 859 OPS, May 822 OPS, June 705, July 617, August currently a 510. So we are kind of seeing this little steady going downward here. And we really, for example, in this month of August, we really haven't seen much of any slug. And we know that is what is his bread and butter. And we know that when he squares up with something, it is going to fly. Because one of the things that Coulson that I've missed seeing from him that we saw a ton last year, Coulson would hit a ton of balls to center and to left center. I feel like that part of his game I have not seen in a minute now. Like a good squared up ball. I remember, when he hit like his second or third homer in Tampa, straightaway center, start hitting some balls to left center at the rate, like in the next series. It's like that kind of, when Coulson is doing that in his game, I think he's in a really good place. And it kind of feels like we're getting a lot of ground outs to the right side or a lot of pop outs. I love the kid. I'm really looking forward to kind of when he is squaring balls and sending them to Mars. But it's not just a little slump. This is a month-long slump at this point. And I think that I'm glad that they made the adjustment to put him down in the 6th hole, just because I know that the data's been out there as well that, he's batting 193 with runners in scoring position. You compare that, obviously, on the way other end of the spectrum. A guy like Benintendi is batting around 370 or 380 with runners in scoring position, which is, by the way, one of the best in the league.
I had to bring that stat up to somebody on Twitter because they were trying to trash Benintendi the other day.
It's literally one of the best in the league. It is beyond my comprehension. But with Coulson, getting those at bats in the 4-hole and, producing at only about a 600 OPS with runners in scoring position, that's not going to cut it for being a 4-hole hitter on an AL Central leading team. So I think that I like the way that the lineup has kind of been constructed in this new rendition. We haven't really faced a lefty with the new construction of having Coulson a little bit down, so I'm kind of curious to see what they do there. But as we know, he actually has been better against lefties this year, and I want to give him credit for continuing to do that, but just not seeing righties in that same way is just, it's beating a dead horse at this point. I really want the kid to succeed. We need to definitely just start to see it in the coming weeks.
Yeah, and we'll find out tomorrow what they do against the lefty in terms of the lineup. But yeah, what you said about him maybe driving the ball the other way a little bit more last year, I agree with that, at least anecdotally. And Coulson did say in a recent interview that his goal every at bat is to hit a line drive over the shortstop's head or something like that, which is interesting because how often does he do that, right? Like, I'm not saying there's anything wrong. Like, if that's your goal and you're pulling home runs to the right field all the time, then who cares? Like, you're succeeding. But I wouldn't say that's really – I'm surprised to hear that that's his goal because it doesn't feel like something he is really trying to execute with the way that he swings at the ball. So, the downward decline month over month in OPS is not a huge surprise. In a way, though, it makes me a little bit optimistic because there's still a lot of time left in the rest of the regular season for him to get things back on track. And like we said earlier in the episode, it's a different lineup when, Vargas and Peters and Mydroth and everyone's contributing, not just like the Murakamis and Antonachis. So if Coulson can get back to who he's been for the majority of his short career so far in the, end of the season and playoffs, then this team could actually make some real noise. That's what's exciting about it to me, is that unlocks a new aspect of this team that they haven't really had since about mid-June. But in terms of, what is he doing wrong? What can he do better? Your guess is as good as mine there.
Yeah, no, and I think there's still a little bit of time here before we get into the real crunch of, September, like late September ball games to decide the division and getting into the playoffs for Coulson, kind of get it figured out. And I, honestly, I think the whole like left center field argument here, I think it really does kind of play into what I've seen, like what you see from him, where it's almost like he's waiting for the perfect pitch instead of just making the most of the pitch that he's seeing. Because, with a guy like Coulson Montgomery, you look at his entire profile, it should completely read as like pull power hitter over the right field wall every single time. And whenever we were seeing him do that, left center field home run, that's usually something he's either just a hair late on or it's a pitch that's not necessarily ideal for him to get power on, but he was still finding a way to do it. And like with him being as like particular about early pitches and at bat as he's been, I almost wonder if he's just in this like unwinnable chase of looking for the perfect pitch to swing with power at, and it's just never going to come. You're too much of a proven commodity at this point. Whereas by doing that last year, yeah, you could get away with it, but now pitchers are just going to try to avoid throwing you anything you can get any good piece of. So you have to use more of your tools and force a ball out of there more than you can really just kind of have a simple swing of the bat and make sure that it gets out. So I don't know. There's a lot of advanced metrics I've wanted to look at that I honestly don't have a easy way of finding when it comes to his at bats, especially when it comes to what he does after going down 0-1, or how often he takes the first pitch or anything like that. Obviously you can find pitch count metrics that are a lot easier that will explain a little bit more to that, but I really would love to find a pitching metric where it explains how often he takes the first pitch, because it feels like it's a lot more often than I thought before I started looking at some of his older at bats. And I think that's something that's really a big problem with him. But that all being said, go ahead, Brett. What's that?
There we go. Sorry. I've got the data for you, Duke.
You do.
I do. When Coulson takes the first pitch, he's batting 195. And his OPS is 673. When he swings at the first pitch, he's batting 226, slugging 500. So that's where he's doing a little bit more damage. OPS is 770. And he takes the first pitch, I would say, to do some quick math in my head, I would say about 60-ish% of the time.
Okay. So that lines up with what I'm seeing from the eye test, and that makes perfect sense. I'm glad you pulled that up.
Yeah, more RBIs when he swings at the first pitch in those at-bats. Less strikeouts when he's swinging at the first pitch in those at-bats. Now, a lot of the data is fairly similar, but I figured I could see it, and it does match up with the eye test. So you got good eyes, Duke.
I try. So sometimes it's hard for me to explain it, to be able to put it on a, for the stat nerds out there, which you wouldn't think, but I'm a little bit more of a stat nerd than you think. But I've also been a big believer of the eye test isn't something you can simply ignore. And that's what I've seen from Coulson. And I'm glad that, well, not necessarily glad because it means that there isn't a legitimate issue here, but that's a very fixable one. You look at a guy like Paul Konerko who got away with that because he was just so good and methodical the rest of his at-bat. Coulson, you're not there yet, brother. You can't play I'm going to take first pitch every single time until you are a very established guy and you're going to be able to prove that you can take advantage of what's going to happen later in the at-bat. And it's showing that obviously he can't. So that doesn't mean swing at every first pitch. If it is over your head, please don't. But no, that's a nice little tidbit. I'm glad you pulled that up, Brett. All right. Well, as we're kind of getting into the final part of the broadcast here, Sox are heading to Wrigley, which naturally we all think they're going to sweep in Wrigley, and just destroy the Cubs and remind them who the little brother is in Chicago. And then we're going to close the week against the Braves in the stupidest one game ever. And then a series against the Mets, who actually helped us out a couple weeks ago. So now we have to pay them back by hopefully just, raining on their parade and reminding them how dumb they are for trading the better Acuna brother to us for Luis Robert. So, gentlemen, how are we feeling about the White Sox this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tougher schedule, at least those first 4 games. But the way I look at it, they have Castillo against the Cubs tomorrow, and then back-to-back TBAs, which Will Venables said might be some combo of Jose Urquidy, Eric Fetty, and bullpen. I'm still kind of hoping that there's like a Drew Thorpe or Shane Smith thrown in there somewhere, but we'll see if they make a move or not. So it's not ideal pitching matchup, is my point, because you don't have Burke or Kay going against the Cubs. And then Kay goes against the Braves, though. At least that's how he's lined up. So my hope is they find a way to go 2-2 at least in those 4 games against the Cubs and Braves. And that Mets series, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it was like the Reds and Tigers results this week. I wouldn't be shocked if the Sox do well against the Cubs and or Braves and then lose the series to the Mets. Only because the Mets are randomly red hot. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but they're winning a lot recently. So I don't think we should be looking at their record and just laughing them off. That being said, the Cubs had a pretty bad weekend, and the White Sox had the opposite. So the momentum kind of going into tomorrow's series is really on the White Sox side. But the crosstown series is always so different in terms of just the energy, and you kind of have to throw everything out the window and just start fresh. So just try to grind out a couple wins. I mean, the White Sox already won a series against the Cubs, of course, earlier in the year. So winning both would be pretty cool if they're able to pull that off.
I've been saying this all year when even especially here on the podcast, this is something that I kind of am keeping championing because they keep truly doing it, is keep treading water. Like just keep holding the line a little bit of we play 500 ball the whole rest of the year at bare minimum. We're going to be in a good place. We are going to win 87 to 89 games, which also just saying that out loud is absolutely absurd with just White Sox fandom the last few years. But really, find a way to go forward. It's 7 games, 3 Cubs, 1 Braves, 3 Mets. Find a way to be at least 4-3. Don't really care how you do it. Just I'd rather not go 4 wins in a row and then 3 losses in a row, of course. But as long as these guys can do what they do all year, is tread water, find yourself being able to be resilient and kind of keep it on, I'm going to be happy because it's what they've continued to do for probably the last like 4 months, 3 months at this point, like 3-4 months. Nick, I'm kind of with you. I kind of want to see a Shane Smith start in there. I want to see it. I think that there is a potential time and place for it in the next 2 weeks or so with a very heavy schedule, a taxed potentially bullpen. I wouldn't mind seeing it. And hey, if it is a little bit of a disaster, like maybe we saw with Tanner McDougal, then we have the ability to send him back down and he can be depth in AAA for now. But I think that seize the option while you've got it.
I think Shane Smith has plenty of time to grow a playoff beard if he decides he wants to show up and be a major league pitcher for us. But I will say I'm realistic about, like, jokes aside, being realistic about the Cubs series. I'll be more than happy to take 2 or 3. Obviously that can go the other way around. Cubs are looking for momentum in every possible way, and we're coming off a weekend where we just gained a lot of our momentum back, when it comes to the AL Central race. So those series could literally go any way on any given year, no matter where both teams are. So we're just going to have to kind of see what that is. All I know is the crowds are going to be absolutely nuts. And if I have to listen to us losing game 3 and have to listen to Go Cubs Go, I'm probably going to go jump in the lake, but I will swim back out. I promise. I'll be back out for the Braves series, or the Braves game, I should say. I don't really care what happens with the Braves game because it's one game. It's stupid. I hate that we're playing it right when we are. And then when it comes to the Mets, dude, honestly, all I want L.A. Acuna to be in the lineup all 3 games, and I want him to just have the best series of the season for us. So that's about where I'm at. I feel pretty good about where the White Sox are. I think we go, to your point, Brett, I think we at least go 500 over this stretch, and we're rocking and rolling. And as somebody in the chat said, that is just incredible to me. Who needs Kyle Teal? We're 5-1 when Drew Romo homers.
Well, there you go.
Is that Jordan's burner?
Mausa 225, if I'm saying that right. I don't know. That could be a last burner. It could be just trying to throw us off the scent or something.
Oh man, with the Mets series, only one other thing that I want to see Jeffrey on pitch at least once.
Oh yeah.
I love it. I'm so here for it. I want to see it happen.
Did you see him yesterday? I think it was. He threw what he thought was strike 3, but it wasn't. He did his whole jumping up and down thing, and he challenged him with the ball.
I did see that.
Yeah, but he struck him out later, so no harm, no foul, I guess.
I've seen quite a bit of that in baseball this year. Those closers that just have that big, like, some sort of thing, or they do the sword or anything. Then it just immediately gets called as a ball, and like everyone's like, oh. Okay, I guess I got to keep throwing. But all right, boys. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Let's keep winning some ball games. Let's do it. Why not? Why not us?
Yeah,
why not
I agree.
That's been the story of the whole 2026 White Sox. Why not us? I love it. That's perfect to freaking close out on. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have this week for the Sox on 35th podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere else you get your podcast. Also, be sure to hit the bell so you can be on these live streams. There's a lot of great comments on here. Wish I could have gotten to some more of them. They would have thrown us so far off track. That's the only reason I didn't. But we will definitely get to some more of these as we keep moving forward. I saw some pretty good ones. Brett got a big compliment in here over pulling up that status fast he did. So maybe Brett just has to play in the background when it's me, Nick, and Laz, and just pop in and give us stat updates in our arguments.
Hey, I take my bullpen games with pride. I'll just maybe I become the podcast stat guy. Who knows?
Hey man, you'll be like the Jamie of the podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, pull that up. Only kidding. But be sure to hit the bell. Be sure to hit the hype button if you can find it. We're all far too old for that. So if you're Zoomer or something. I don't know.
I'm not that old.
Okay, where's the hype button on YouTube, Brett?
You can find it.
Okay, but anyway, be sure to check out the website soxon35th.com, as well as following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at soxon35th to stay up to date with your Chicago White Sox. This has been Duke Coughlin, joined by Nik Gaur and Brett Haffner. We'll be back next week as we cover another week of White Sox baseball. Thank you. Go Sox.
Go Sox.
Go Sox.